All right, welcome everyone to our OKLIS session on accessibility. We have a large crowd here today, so thank you all for coming. Really quickly, OKLIS stands for the Oklahoma Learning Innovation Summit. This is a conference that we have in the spring, and there will be an in-person/hybrid session available in April 25th and 26th. So be watching for information on that. OKLIS is for the entire state, for faculty, staff, administrators, even students are welcome to participate. OKLIS is sponsored by COLE, which is the Council for Online Learning Excellence. And we have several committees, including professional development, accessibility, and several others. So this particular professional development opportunity for the state is provided through the Professional Development Committee in conjunction with accessibility. And Allie Sharp, who is about to give our first presentation, is a co-chair for the Accessibility Committee of COLE. Allie is from Langston University. She's an instructional designer and the director for faculty development there, and does lots of training for both Langston and for everyone in COLE and opportunities like this. She's an amazing asset for our state. As a quick reminder, please stay on mute unless you are invited to ask a question, and then you can come off mute. In general, if you have a question, the best practice will be to use the raise hand feature and wait for Allie or myself to call on you. You can also put questions in the chat and I will help Allie make sure that we catch those questions, but there will be a lot of people here, so those will be the best way to be organized with those questions. And with that, I will let Allie get started.
Thank you so much. And we are sweater twins today. So, okay, so remember how just 2 seconds ago I showed you my PowerPoint and it opened? And now it's doing the spinning thing. So let me make sure that it's going to go. So thank you for that lovely introduction. And if this doesn't work, like I promise you, it is on my screen and it's just spinning. I may have to just come out of the Zoom and then come right back in. But I have a list of resources for everyone that I will share. And this is what it means to be a teacher. Like, globes don't spin in front of kids, you know. I'm gonna see if I can't. I'm gonna just come into PowerPoint on the web is what I'm gonna do, because it seems to not want to open up, even though we just saw it going. So we're on plan B already. Okay, hang on. And I will share my screen. I apologize for this. Okay. All right. Is it sharing now?
Yes, it is.
Oh, good. Okay, here we go. Thank you for your patience. If it starts having problems, let me know. So today we'll be talking about accessibility in Microsoft Office 365. They're switching the terms around, so they're starting to drop the Office word and just make it Microsoft 365, by the way. And I'm Allie Sharp, and I'm from Langston University. That's why you are seeing that proud lion. If you ever come visit Langston, or if you are on the Langston campus right now, we have a campus on Oklahoma City in Ardmore. We have the new news station. We have a Tulsa campus, and then I work at the Langston campus, and that is our lion logo. And you will also notice that we have orange and blue, which is our colors at Langston University. So I also want to make sure everyone knows how to turn on the closed captioning. So on your computer, it may say closed captioning. It may say live transcript, or if you are on a phone, it may just have a little CC. But if you would like to turn on your closed captions, that will follow along. That way you could see what I'm saying. So here's a little bit about me. My name is Allie Sharp. I'm at Langston. I'm the I'm the director of faculty development, and I'm an instructional designer. My email is sharpa@langston.edu. And I also have a website that I do not keep up to date very often, but it is a sharp cookie because when I taught senior citizens, one of them used to say I was a sharp cookie. But sometimes when I do presentations, if there's files that people want, if you're not in our OneDrive, I can't share them. So I'll put them on my website for people. So that's why I like to tell people what my website is in case you want files. I'm always happy to share stuff. And sometimes I just have to put it on there to make it easy. So here's my path to accessibility in education. I was a teacher. I taught at Stillwater Middle School for a long time. And I also taught high school. I taught at NOC and the Gateway for NOC and OSU. As part of the OSU writing project, I was a Comp 1 and 2 teacher. I was a business and community technology trainer for Meridian and for other career tech schools, like Gordon Cooper. And I primarily taught Microsoft Office, but I also taught digital devices. And I will say that teaching digital technology showed me how life-changing accessibility tools could be. When I was a teacher, it was often that accessibility was for people who had a diagnosis or who had a 504 or an IEP. When I started working with senior citizens, who were my absolute favorite, and I got a certificate in gerontology last year because I love working with senior citizens, I would use a lot of the accessibility tools as a teacher when I was doing community training. And it was truly life-changing. I taught a class on using the Kindle, a 3-hour class. And one of the people in the class told me that he had not been able to read a newspaper since about the 80s because newspapers didn't have large enough print. And so he was finally able to get the sports scores. So digital tools like being able to increase the font size, those are life-changing experiences. And we're all going to get older. So all the things we talk about today are things that are for us now and in the future. My path to digital accessibility is because I was a technology trainer. I was a trainer for Stillwater Schools as well as a teacher. I was a trainer through Career Tech. And then I continue training now. My Microsoft certifications, I'm a Microsoft Innovative Educator and a Microsoft Educator Trainer. My training actually on Microsoft comes from Career Tech. And I always tell people that because people are like, how did you become an Excel ninja? Because for a while I think I probably still am one of the most advanced Excel trainers in the state. It all comes from our Career Tech system. Like I know more than Microsoft actual trainers sometimes. Our Career Tech system is amazing. So if you ever want to learn Microsoft Office, go to Career Tech. It's like $25 or something. I'm also a Google certified educator and a Google certified trainer. I will say that today is all Microsoft. I could do this same thing for Google and I would be very enthusiastic as well. So my guiding philosophy is that we don't have special needs. We all have the same needs, but we use different tools to meet them. And some of those tools you can see right up here. We have our closed captioning. We have sign language. We have people who may not be using visual tools, or they may be using assistive audio devices. They may be using Braille. There's audio descriptions. And if you have ever, if you use Apple TV or something like that, you can turn on the audio descriptions when you're listening to a show and it will tell you kind of what's going on. So there you go. And obviously we also have different motion needs and different motion tools. I like this quotation, so I thought I would share it, that treating different things the same can generate as much inequality as treating the same things differently. By Kimberly Crenshaw. And I think that quotation comes up a lot when we talk about accessible tools, that we don't want to treat different things the same. We want to honor that sometimes we need different tools. And that brings us to my Microsoft focus. And I do try to model and normalize the tools. Microsoft is a platform of business. I think it's important that we model what Microsoft offers to students because they will likely use Microsoft in future jobs, not just as employees, but also in creating things. Microsoft has a strong inclusivity commitment. The things that I'll show you are not in beta. That's one way it's different from Google, is that Google will have features that they turn on for a while and then turn off. Microsoft, once they put it in, they're consistent in keeping it. And one of the tools that I love about Microsoft is called Tell Me. Sometimes on computers, you'll see it called Search or the What Do You Want to Do tool. And this is one of my absolute favorite things, and it's an amazing tool for accessibility. At the top of all of your Microsoft Office platforms, like Excel or Word or whatever, you'll see something that says Tell Me. And then when you type in it or when you go to it, you can tell it what you want to do out loud or typing. And for example, change fonts, and it will bring you to that tool exactly. So this makes Microsoft really strong with accessibility because you can just say, tell me, and tell it, and it's pretty good about picking up on the words. And then it will bring, so if you wanted to know how to add subtitles to your presentation, it will walk you through doing that. So that makes it hands above one of the best accessibility features because it will take you to it directly. Wow. Yes. Oh, I thought somebody was asking something. If we were live in person right now, I would be turning on our captions for PowerPoint. So I want to make sure that you know how to do that, that inside PowerPoint, you can turn on live captions and subtitles. I would not, I would also be using it if we had, people who were requesting multiple languages, because then they could have the Zoom captions in one language and have our PowerPoint in another language. But when you are doing this, if you're in PowerPoint and you choose always use subtitles, make sure that Zoom updated their annotation tools. Make sure that you choose either below the slide or above the slide, because if it's overlaid, it's going to block your words. So if I'm in a presentation live, I choose below slide because that's where we normally see captions. However, we can say above slide if people are using their own subtitles and captions, just so you know. Okay, so next, I also want to highlight that there's a tool called Present Live in PowerPoint, which is what I would be doing if we were live. In doing this, you just choose Present Live, and then you will it will show a QR code. Everyone in the audience can scan the QR code, and then they can follow along on their phones, and they can also set up the captioning they want. So that is a tool. So in the advertisement that Crystal sent out, it said that we're going beyond alt text. So to go beyond it, I do want to make sure we all know how alt text works. First, we just explain things the way that we would over the phone. And I have started using ChatGPT and other AI to generate those descriptions. Like I just upload the picture and say, write alt text, and it does a great job. Decorative means that the image does not convey any meanings at all. So like a line doesn't convey meaning. However, logos are often necessary. It helps people validate the source. And in terms of schools, it can help have a sense of belonging and that we're part of something. So we always want to describe the images. In reading aloud, we would do that with books. In presentations, we want to describe the images. And I tried to do that at the beginning, actually, when I pointed out the lion and why I'm using orange and blue. So here's how you do alt text, is that when you're in Office anywhere in Microsoft, you select the picture first and then choose the alt text option. And you just write it out like you would do it over the phone. So you won't see the alt text option until you select the picture, and then you can right click it, or you'll see a toolbar that says alt text. So for the lion icon, the lion image, I say it's the Langston lion statue at the Student Success Center. For the colors, I say it's the blue and orange Langston theme. This presentation theme is one that I use when I'm away from home at Langston, and actually when I'm at home at Langston. So another great tool is the accessibility checker. This is similar to the Tell Me in that if you just remember it exists, it will do a lot of the heavy work for you. It's pretty much always in the same place. You go to the review tab, check accessibility. In Excel, you'll see review, check accessibility, PowerPoint, review, check accessibility, Word, review, check accessibility. So when you get in the pattern of using it, then you'll be able to see it frequently. There's also a ribbon that sometimes will pop up. You'll see it a lot in PowerPoint when it's just kind of on the far right side of the screen right now, but that's where you'll see new tools. So this PowerPoint one, when you see the accessibility tool, one of the new tools, newish tools, is that you can now inspect without color so that you can see your presentations on how they would look to somebody who may not be seeing the colors in a standard way. And it's always important to use the default colors that Microsoft has if you're not experienced in setting up colors and contrast, because then you can kind of trust that the colors will look okay to someone who may not be seeing all of them. But inspect without colors lets you see what a presentation might look like to someone else. You also can see a reading order pane so that you can tab through and see if someone's not using a mouse, how does it feel for them? So this presentation, when I chose inspect without color, I can see that it has actually kind of a gray brown, but it's still readable, which is what the important feature is. So inspect without color is one of those tools. So here's our accessibility checker in action. This little video is from Microsoft, and it's showing it in Word. So when we come in, we are going to left click or select the review tab and choose check accessibility. And then it comes up with a window of suggestions, and it will explain why it suggests those. But then when you left click on them, it walks you through making the corrections that you need to make. And so, and then it also will give you instructions on how you can fix those things. You'll see errors, and then you'll see the errors are things that really do need to be corrected. Warnings are things that you need to consider based on the circumstances. And the tips are just, if you fix this, that's a best practice. But sometimes we know this PowerPoint is being live, and so it doesn't need to have the same accessibility as for someone who is working through it on a self-paced, because I'm here to explain and describe. So errors definitely should be fixed. Warnings, really consider it, and tips are best practices. So the easier it is for your students to access your content, whether it's in a course or a classroom, or the easier it is for in any circumstance, the easier it is for students to access something, the easier it is to engage. So if we know as humans that we're going to take the easiest option. And we also know that everyone has limited time. So when we're thinking about courses and design, if we know our students will put in an hour in our course, we have to think, do I want them struggling to manage the text, or do I want to give them options so that if they need the text read aloud, they can get to the content and the ideas? So just think about it as your students will always choose the easiest things because they're human and that's just what we do. So we want to make things as easy as possible. When I'm designing, I try to consider these students who may have limited vision. So maybe they need an audio version, or they may need larger print images. And so I'll usually test like the Control+ to make sure that if they're making something larger, it's not getting cut off by images. They may have limited hearing, so they may need to be able to have a discussion that's by text, versus like email or in a discussion board. They may need closed captioning. Limited motion, they may need to be using the tab key or assisted devices. So if you test what you make, like a PowerPoint or in your course with the tab key, then you can see how people who may have limited motion will be using it. And then sometimes we have people who will have limited speech. And so where this really comes in that I've seen is when an assignment is to give a 2-minute summary or give a 1-minute introduction. And often as instructors, we make those because we want it to be like short and sweet, but we also think, okay, anybody can do something for a minute. Well, for students who have limited speech, such as maybe having a speech hesitation or a stutter, those time limits can become very difficult. And so you may need to give options for students who have limited speech to have a written version or a recorded version, or even just lifting the temporal restrictions that they can speak longer. So consider those people when we're designing. And here are some principles of universal design. And Microsoft adapts these as well. These are general from North Carolina. It needs to be useful for everyone. Everyone needs to be able to use it in your anticipated audience. It needs to be flexibility. So it needs to be adapted to what users need. It needs to be simple and intuitive. If it's not easy to understand, help them understand it. That's why I do the Zoom caption screen at the start to remind people how to use it, because not everybody knows that they have that option. It needs to be clear and effective in its perception. That's like those Microsoft tool warnings, guides. There needs to be a way of minimizing mistakes, such as warnings, or giving students a heads up. This is the next thing that's going to happen. So that way they can predict what will happen and it will reduce errors. It needs to be very easy to use. If a mouse is hard for someone to use, which happens frequently as people get older, they may have arthritis, or for people who have limited motion, there needs to be some options, such as the tab key, such as the dictation tool. And this also can be temporary. For example, if you have students who show up with a broken arm, sometimes using the dictation tool instead of writing would make a big difference. And then we need to consider the size and space use, such as accommodating body space. It could be people who have a larger body size. It could be people who are left-handed and need space to write while they're sitting next to someone who's right-handed, or right-handed next to left-handed. It may be using a wheelchair or similar device and needing space to move into group work. So consider these when we're designing our classrooms and our spaces for learning. So Microsoft has a whole lot of tools. Sometimes they'll call them accessibility tools. Sometimes they call them inclusive access. The more recent language has been learning tools, and then there's also the word accelerators that are starting to appear. These are the essential tools and resources for success. That is how they are defining it. So when you see a Microsoft accelerator, what that is actually a learning tool. And the emphasis is on accessibility, both for students and for instructors. So the idea is that you can be using these tools for yourself. You can use them to model for your students, and obviously your students can use it. So one thing that students and all of us learn is that there are some exclusive tools. These are resource limited and they are reserved for people who meet a certain criteria. We see this every day with things like disabled parking and limited devices. So those are exclusive, and students often learn not to request those because they have to have that because they're limited. The Microsoft tools that we're talking about are inclusive. These are the tools that are available for everyone, and we're also used to those. There's ramps, which can be used by anyone. It could be due to mobility issues. It could be that you're carrying a suitcase or pushing a stroller. Closed captioning. It could be that there's somebody who's not able to hear it, or it could be that it is enhancing learning to read it and follow along. At the university level, it could be that students are in a dorm room and can't, their AirPods died, and so they're just reading along so that their roommates don't hear it. There's a lot of reasons to use these tools, but this is what's meant by inclusive access. It means that they are available to everyone. It's really important that we demonstrate using inclusive and accessible tools so that they're normalized as options. Like I said, we're going to need them as we age anyway, But the more that students see them, the more they understand this is available to me if I need it. This is not something that is, if I use it, it's not available for someone else. And it's not even indicative of a medical diagnosis. All it means is that someone's using it. So one of those tools is dictation. This is appearing in all sorts of places in Microsoft. It's really common in Word. You'll also see it in OneNote and in PowerPoint and in Outlook. And sometimes it looks like a little blue microphone or a little white microphone in a blue circle. Sometimes it looks like a blue microphone. And when you left click on it, there's a little down arrow sometimes if it's on the desktop version, and it will let you choose what language you want to use. And that can also help with people who may be speaking with an accent. It can help pick up the words that way. So if there's not a drop down arrow, it's just using whatever the device language settings are. So on your phone, if your keyboard is set to English United States, that's what the dictation picks up. But if you see the drop down arrow, it lets you pick out the language that you want to speak. And then it types directly. The dictation screen gives instructions on how to add commas and punctuations and emphasis. So dictation, you can start talking and it will start typing. From a writing teacher perspective, this is very valuable because when students are writing through dictation, it's much more like the writing process versus dictating to another person, which can become more like storytelling. So having dictation lets a person express their own thoughts without an audience. There's also keyboard shortcuts, and I have a list of resources that I'll give everyone with all of this stuff. But keyboard shortcuts allow you just to use your keyboard instead of using a mouse or instead of using the menus on a computer screen. And the one that we mostly know is Control Z, because it is the one that will undo errors. So I can probably do that gesture in my sleep. But Control Z is one of those keyboard shortcuts. Microsoft has keyboard shortcuts for every platform like Windows, Mac, web, etc. And they have them for every software. So I will be giving you that list so that way you can go through and find the ones that you use. There's also keyboard covers that you can put on top of a keyboard that show the keyboard shortcuts that may be useful for someone who will be perhaps using dictation, so they don't need the keyboard for letters, but they may need the keyboard in short ways for motions. Another tool that has appeared inside of Microsoft is called Viva Wellbeing. This is more for the adults, or for employees, I should say. You won't necessarily see this in students, but it's being rolled out to teams. So if your school uses Teams, they'll see it. So an example of the Viva Wellbeing is it has, I'll link to it so you can see mine, but it asks questions like, how are you feeling? And you can fill it out, and it's supposed to just stay with you. It also has a little wind down every day that it will pop up to help end the day and prepare for the next transition. So these are really part of Microsoft's commitment towards mental health and mental well-being. So I'll show you an example of what the Viva Wellbeing looks like. And we will go into my this is the Langston University one. So is that screen showing that it's not the PowerPoint now? It's a web browser? If somebody can give me thumbs up. Okay, thank you. So in the Viva Wellbeing, you can see it lets you send praise and things like that. But one of the things it has is it has headspace meditations built in, so that if you need a little break, you can take one and it will play music and it will play a brief meditation for you. So it will have, and then it has additional mindfulness exercises. So this is part of your Microsoft 365, and it is called the Wellbeing Analytics, and it's also called Viva. You might see it there, and I included that on the handout so that you could see how it you'll be able to explore that for yourself on how the Viva Insights can work for you. But you'll see some of that in Teams. So going to some of our tools that Microsoft has. If there was one of the big things, it's for students, for everyone, to use the Microsoft Edge browser. It's similar to Google Chrome. It's actually built on the same things as Google Chrome. But the Microsoft Edge browser is truly so committed to accessibility. It has audio versions of text in two ways. One is called Read Aloud, and one is called Immersive Reader. It has a PDF reader, which means it can adapt a fixed document. Students can annotate on a PDF, so they can underline things, they can draw, they can highlight, and also it will adapt a PDF to being read aloud through Immersive Reader. It's also available for free on a PC, Mac, Chromebook, Android, iOS. So once students learn these tools and icons, they can use it on multiple devices. So an example of this is one of the thing I tested on. So here's an example of how I would normalize a tool. It would be common to show a website to students, like this is the Langston Career and Professional Development site. So when I'm showing them the site, in addition to saying, hey, here's the site where you can see about the careers, I can also show it to them using the Read Aloud tool. So I'm going to left click on the Read Aloud icon.
Welcome to Langston University's Virtual Career Center. Upcoming events. Langston University Spring 2024 Career Fair. Tuesday, February 27th at 10 a.m. to 2.
And you can see how it highlights the words as it's reading. So visually people can see where it is and track, and then they can also hear it. And I'll show you more closely what that icon looks like. But that's an example of how when you're showing students a website, you can also show them the tools that go along with it in creating accessible actions. So Read Aloud looks like the letter A with a little sound icon, and you'll see this in multiple browsers. It works on most pages, and in Microsoft Edge, it's available offline. So the images would stay on the page if the page was open and the internet went out, but they could still be hearing it read out loud. And then the keyboard shortcut is Control-Alt-Space, or it's a right click on the menu. So I want to show you what Read Aloud would look like for a student. So this is a journal article, which we all know so well. So I'm at JSTOR right now, and I'm reading it out loud. I'm hoping this is sharing it. Okay, I'm coming up to my browser, and I'm pressing the Read Aloud.
Toggle thumbnails, zoom in, zoom out, fit to height. Previous page. /20 next page. Search within document. Exit reading mode. 2005 Figure 1 The experiential learning cycle and regions of the cerebral cortex.
It's reading the document out loud.
From Sol 2002. Preference for employing different phases of the learning cycle. Because of our hereditary equipment, our particular life experiences, and the demands of our present environment, we develop a preferred way of choosing among the 4 learning modes.
And I can press pause. I had to move the Zoom menu to get to the pause button. We can press pause. We can change our voice options, and we can change the speed. So the pitch and the tone of the voice can be changed, and the speed. So that a student can open up a PDF and even in a frame, like the way I'm back. I hope I didn't say something sideways that made you kick me out. Okay, we were talking about Immersive Reader and how it does all these amazing things. So let me show you this, because this would be the thing to show your students. And I'm thinking that when I don't know, who knows what I did. I'm sure I did something. Okay, so this is Scientific American. This is just an article. At the very top of my menu, instead of just the A with the little signs, it has a book with an audio. And this is what immersive reader looks like. It's the same article, but suddenly, by the way, all the ads are gone, but all the clutter is gone. I have the read aloud tools, but that's not what's really great for me right now. There's something called reading preferences, where we can turn on line focus, and it narrows it down from 1 line up to 3, so that students can be focusing on a very narrow view. This is very helpful for students who may have some ADHD or focus issues, or just students who are working on a harder topic and they need to have more focus, or they're in a busy environment. We can translate the entire document. I don't speak Japanese, but we're going to see how this looks. When it is translated, the entire document can be translated, and the read aloud changes as well. I don't know if that's accurate, but in trainings where I've done this with people and I've asked them, is this accurate? They've said that it is accurate. For the languages, I am able to speak French to a degree, and when I fix it to French, it does work. So read aloud has these tools, or I mean, immersive reader has these tools of line focus and translation. We can also change our text. We can change our text size, which you can also do with the Control+ key. We can change the spacing, which for some people is very valuable. We can change the fonts, and we can change the column size. So that way, this is actually just really nice if you need to, if you're on a different sort of device. But for students who may have other devices on their screen where they, or other images on their screen tools, being able to change the column size can help. If you have students who complain about headaches, sometimes that can happen if they're reading in a room that has different lighting or too bright of lighting, and showing students how to change these page colors can reduce the eye strain and reduce some of those headaches that are related to reading in odd lights.
Hey,
So oh, yes.
I have a question in the chat. Can you back up just a little and show how you got to that immersive reader?
Yes, I will. So I'm going to show it on that PowerPoint again, just so you can see what the icon looks like. You will see this in Microsoft Word. It's actually in Canvas. It says immersive reader in Canvas. You'll see it all over Microsoft Office, and it looks like a book with a volume button. So when I come into my web browser, it's up in the top corner, and it looks like a book. It only works on pages that have a lot of text. So it wouldn't work on on YouTube because that's a video. But it has the read aloud option.
NASA's Mars helicopter Ingenuity ends mission.
With the voice options that we know about from others, from our regular read aloud and our reading speed. But it also has the text preferences, and it has the reading preferences. In Microsoft Word, you'll see even more options, such as seeing it broken down by syllabus by the syllables, or by word types such as adverbs or verbs, and you'll see that in Canvas as well. So that can really help students when they're studying. If they just highlight the nouns, that they can, then it will let them study a little bit faster. You can also highlight a specific word, and it will just read you that one word if you needed it.
Ends mission on the red planet
So,
after 3 years.
You don't have to have the whole document done, but you'll see this all across Microsoft Office and in the Edge browser, and it is absolutely amazing. So if that's one of the things that I try to show everyone because it's valuable for everyone. So the read aloud only looks like the letter A with the sound. Immersive Reader looks like a book, and you will see it all through Office. Now, if you want to prepare your documents so that they work well for students who are using reading tools, the way to do that is to use heading levels. So when you're in Microsoft Word, you'll see a box called Styles. And if you're on a small screen, it just looks like the letter A, or it looks like the letter A with a pen. But these styles, they will let you tell the document what order things are in and the level of importance. So I want to show you how that works with my with a document. How about animals in Oklahoma? So I'm going to come down to the lower right corner to just increase the zoom size so that you can see it better. At the very bottom of the Microsoft hides the best stuff on the like little tiny corners of a screen. It has the zoom so that you can come in and see larger. Also, we can reduce the ribbon size or increase the ribbon size to get more of a screen. So if my ribbon looks different than what you're used to seeing, it's because I have it collapsed. So I'm going to come to the styles pane. And I know that this is a document called Discovering Oklahoma's Wildlife. So that's my title. And then this is my subtitle.
Allie, we're just seeing the using heading levels, but
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been having this great time. Let me show you this. Okay, so are you seeing it now?
yes.
Okay, so here's the zoom down in the very bottom corner. Thank you for letting me know that. Yeah, you guys have to give me a shout. If I remember, I taught middle school. There's nothing you can say that would bother me at all. Tell me if I'm doing things wrong. So we have, when I'm in the style pane, which mine may look different from yours. Yours may look like a wider ribbon like this, and you'll see it in a block. By adding the headings, I am telling Microsoft the importance of it. And so for students who use navigations, or for anyone who's using navigation by heading, watch what will happen on the left side. Right now, the document can be searched, but Microsoft doesn't know which ones are the most important. So I'm going to say that I'm going to come to my Home tab and choose heading 1. And suddenly it appears on the side of ways to explore Oklahoma. And so then I have heading 2, who calls Oklahoma home. And it can go all the way through, like, you know, on how it would look. And each time I do it, it adds it to the navigation pane. The reason this is valuable is that for a large document, students may not be able to use a mouse. They can use their tab key by tabbing through, or anyone can select, even on a touch screen or with a mouse or whatever, can select, and it moves it directly to that heading. So the styles pane is really valuable. It tells screen readers what the importance is, and it tells students the order of importance. So now I'm going to come back in and show you the PowerPoint. And I'm sorry, I'm not able to read the chat at the same time yet, but here's the benefits of using the headings. There's that navigation ease and speed, like what we saw. You can locate sections by tab, mouse, keyboard, or voice. So you could say skip to the next heading. It enhances readability. It breaks up the blocks of text and it creates consistency. It tells students these are the areas, just like we would with the chapters or sections of a book. Formatting becomes so easy with headings. The design tab in Word is really magical and it changes the formats. When you PDF export, it knows the structure because of the headings, and you can auto-generate a table of contents based on the headings. Also, in terms of collaboration, this is just more of the instructional design side of me. It's really easy to tell students, you get this section, you get this section, and it helps them stay in place because they know where their headings are. So I'm going to move back to the documents now to give you an idea of that. So if students are collaborating on a document and you tell them you're working on state animals, they know click on state animals and that's where they're going to be. Students who are working on fun ways to explore Oklahoma know that that's where they're going to be. So for collaboration, that is a very powerful tool. But I also want to show you the design side. So I'm going to go in a little smaller spot. And so when we're designing something, there's a tool called Designer for Microsoft. And you'll see this in PowerPoint and all over the place. But by labeling the headings, like the title and the headings, it automatically changes the fonts and the heading levels based on the design. So come to one of my course design trainings and I will show you so many things that you can do with these kind of tools. But for something like this is a horrible font that we would never want to use because it's really hard to read. But let's say that this was the font and you realized, oh no, you could come in and choose something that was more manageable for students or for readers and change your design all at once because you've told Microsoft what the areas of the documents mean. So again, that's on the Home tab and it's under Styles. And then you can see what each one is and it lets you add in tools. In terms of a table of contents, let's pretend that we're adding in a table of contents for this document. I'm going to choose Insert Table of Contents, and it will use the headings to figure it out. And so here we go. Oh, I think I pressed it twice. The table of contents becomes, you can click on it and use it directly to go. So that's how if somebody's making a document that has 50 pages, by marking the headings, then it will automatically give it a table of contents. In the full desktop version of Word, it will also show, you can do an index and things like that from it. So now I'm going to move back to the PowerPoint. Headings have so many tools, and I put the link in my resource handout for headings so you can learn all about them. But here's what the heading level examples are. And as you're teaching students this, because they need to learn to make accessible documents for each other and for work. The title obviously is the title of the document, and then the subtitle is what comes under it. Heading 1 is always for that segment. So it doesn't go like heading 1, 2, 3, 4, each heading in order of the document. It's in order of outline level. So land animals would be heading 1, then mammals heading 2, heading 3 would be the bison. So heading levels fit an outline structure, and that's an important tool for students to know. And a little side magic that I'm going to show you real quick because I love it so much. So let me come back to the document. This is, I think we could call this accessible because it does reduce the amount of work for design. For students, you can, because I've mentioned my heading levels, it will make an automatic PowerPoint, and I can just say export to PowerPoint, and it is not printing. I don't know why they use a printer, but it will automatically make a PowerPoint based on those headings. So for people who may need to have reduced time, that's a really fast way. And it auto-generated the images, and it figured all that out based on, and it's not perfect. There's a picture of an elephant, but all of that can be changed. So because I did heading levels, it lets me use my document in a lot of ways. That is called Microsoft Word to PowerPoint. And I didn't put that in my handout because I wasn't planning to show it to you, but I'll add it in. So there's a few more tools from Microsoft. One is called Seeing AI. That used to be, it's designed for people who are blind, but You don't have to be living with visual impairments to use this. And there's also the Lens app. So here's an example of the Seeing AI app, which is currently only available for iPhones, but it will be coming to other devices. It has multiple modes in one app. It can read short text. It can read documents, and it can read barcodes and tell you about it. In addition, it can tell you about people and their expressions. It also does their age. So just FYI, test that out before you. Yeah. It can describe a scene, and it can look at currency and tell you the value. This is important for people with visual impairments because our US currency is always the same feeling and color. So it's hard to determine by size. Seeing AI can adapt to that. It can describe colors, and it can read handwriting. So here's a demonstration. I filmed this in real time, and I could barely record it because it was so fast. The Seeing AI app has a barcode scanner. So I'm not going to play this whole video, but you can see it going in action.
Product.
I scanned the barcode.
Tide Pods liquid laundry detergent packs. Free and gentle. 57 pound. Tide Pods liquid
And then
laundry
it reads it
detergent
aloud
packs.
after
Free and
scanning
gentle.
it.
57
So this
pound.
could be
Tide
read at a
Hypoallergenic.
store.
Dermatologist tested. Free of dyes and perfumes 3-in-1.
This could be used at a store. This could be used in a home. It's reading a round can,
Processing.
which I legit could not read that because it was reflective and it was round, and it was able to tell me everything about it. This is
Processing.
describing.
A bunch of bananas with a purple label.
This is a picture of a photo.
Processing. A picture of people sitting on a bench in front of a plane.
That's a
Process.
speaker my
hand
husband
holding a
designed,
speaker.
and that's my dog in my backyard.
Processing. A dog standing in a field.
So it's not exactly perfect, but it's pretty good. Now this is no judgment zone. I left this spray thing out all summer.
Family care unscented with aloe vera insect repellent.
And even though the words had all faded, it knew what it was based on the barcode. This is Seeing AI. It is an amazing, amazing app. It's only available for iPhone though. Another app that Microsoft makes is called Microsoft Lens. This is not as good. It's actually kind of annoying, but it works with all Microsoft apps. You can take a picture of paper, of a whiteboard, of sketches, and it will try to adapt it. So it does well with text, but like a drawing of a circle, it's not that great. But then it can be sent directly to PowerPoint. So it can read, or a PowerPoint, Word, Outlook, whatever. So here's text. It fit it sideways when I just held up my camera to it, and then it extracts it, and it will figure out what the words are, and put it as text. It's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty good. This is pages in a book. I just take a picture of it, and then it makes it into a format that can be read aloud. So if I just want one paragraph, it can take that out, and it will put it in a Word document that can then be used with Immersive Reader. So this is a tool that students can use when they have a paper book and they need it read out loud. It can also be shared into another screen. So that's Lens, and that's available for everything. So a summary of those two tools: Seeing AI is the superstar. It is transforming the visual world into audible. It is also only available for iPhone right now. Lens is a pretty good scanner. It links directly to Office 365 and all the applications, and it's available on everything. People use it a lot for receipts and things like that, just to take pictures and scanning. But because it can go into Word and other applications, it can be edited with Dictate, and it can be read aloud with Immersive Reader. So here's our next steps. Please explore the Microsoft tools. I'm going to give you the handout. It's with all sorts of tools on there. Be sure to model how to use them, like using Immersive Reader. And then here is the #1 tip that I have for you, which is to please use that accessibility checker. under the review tab where you press review, check accessibility. That's the most important thing. And one thing that I find it's important to keep in mind for myself and for everyone is that no one can do all of it. Whether you're somebody who is using these tools for the first time to help learn, whether you're somebody who's wanting to use these to teach, whatever's going on in your life, start where you are and use what you have and do what you can. And that comes to us from Arthur Ashe. So thank you so much for coming. I know you didn't have to, it's not your job, and you came anyway. You chose to come, so thank you. I mean, it is your job, but you weren't required. So thank you for coming. And my name is Allie Sharp, and I am at Langston University. I'm often at Langston University on the Langston campus. So if you're ever driving by, come see the goats and come see me. And my email address is sharpa@langston.edu. And I have a whole list of resources that I'm going to give everyone. And I'm going to just real quick add in the Word to PowerPoint. So if you've got questions, I have answers, maybe. So feel free to unmute if you have questions, because I am going to get that resource page real quick so that I can update it for you. And I'm going to add in the Word to PowerPoint.
Thank you, Allie. We actually had one question or a few questions, I think, from people struggling with the immersive reader, but that might be something that they can email you about because it's almost time for our next session.
Yes.
But I think there were a few links and resources that others posted in the chat also. But if you were not able still to get that to work, then make sure that you click on the resource that she sent and then also grab her email.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to put this in, and I do have the link to that as well. So I will put this in the chat. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Allie. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Great job. Since it is 12 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next two presenters. We're going to have a discussion about the legal aspects of accessibility. And we're going to hear from Mackenzie and Brandee. So let me introduce them really quick. Mackenzie earned her Bachelor of Arts from the University of Oklahoma, where she graduated Pi Delta Kappa. She received her Juris Doctorate degree from Southern Methodist University's Dedman School of Law. Following law school, Mackenzie practiced litigation at Spencer Fane, a national law firm in Kansas City, where she specialized in education and employment law. After leaving private practice, she joined the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights as a federal enforcement attorney, investigating allegations of harassment and discrimination in a 5-state region, including ensuring compliance with Title IX during both the late Bush and early Obama administrations. For 9 years, Mackenzie worked for Oklahoma State University and its Board of Regents in several roles, including Associate General Counsel to the board. Since 2017, Mackenzie has served as the Vice President of Legal Affairs and General Counsel for Tulsa Community College, where she supervises governmental affairs, personnel, and provides and directs all legal services for the college's 4 campuses in Tulsa County. Mackenzie is a certified board professional from the Association of Governing Boards, serves on the Audit Committee for the National Association of Colleges and University Attorneys, and recently co-authored a chapter on the First Amendment in higher education for the recently published book, Student Conduct Practice, The Complete Guide for Student Affairs Professionals. Brandee R. Hancock received her Bachelor's of Arts from Oklahoma State University. She then received her Juris Doctorate with honors from the OU College of Law in 2012. After practicing as an associate with Ellis & Ellis in Stillwater, Brandee joined the Office of Legal Counsel for the Board of Regents for Oklahoma Agricultural and Mechanical Colleges in June 2014, where she serves as the Deputy General Counsel. Brandee was named Chief Legal Officer to the Oklahoma State University President in July of 2021. Brandee has co-authored several articles, which have been published in the Oklahoma Bar Journal on topics including Title IX and liquidated damages in coaching contracts. She received the Impact Award from the Oklahoma College Student Personnel Association in May of 2017. Both of these very accomplished women are here today to share some insights also regarding accessibility and how that impacts the things that we do. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to them. Thank you both very much for coming to speak to us today.
Well, thank you very much for those really nice introductions. And Allie, I'm going to tell you, you're a superstar. That was absolutely fascinating, your presentation. And now we get to talk about legal stuff. So that was, I hope we're near as informative as what you were. That was really fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank you for inviting us today. So Brandee and I are going to go back and forth in our conversation. So we don't have a presentation, but we are going to send to you all a Word document afterwards that has all the links to the things that we're talking about. So the idea is sit back, get comfortable, listen, because we're going to talk about two main federal laws that govern website accessibility, particularly for institutions of higher education. Talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we're going to talk about Section 504. And so both of those are governed by two federal agencies, the U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Education, and they share responsibility for enforcing these laws. However, they apply them very differently, and their enforcement mechanisms are totally different. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we jump in, we need to roll back in time to a simpler age before COVID. So we're going to roll back to 2018. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. Like, how did we get here with the Department of Education and the Department of Justice and how they regulate web accessibility? Because for those of us, now I'm going to age myself, Brandee. Brandee's younger than I am. For those of us that have been around the block for a while and actually worked under, I'll say W, right? So George W. Bush, not his dad. You know, we've seen a lot of changes in how our web accessibility is regulated. So let's roll back to 2018. Back in March of 2018, the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, now notably my former employer back in the day, they changed the way that they processed cases, partially because in 2018, they had 12,000 complaints filed with the OCR. So that's an astronomical number in comparison to like how many complaints they typically receive. And so as they looked at that, they noticed that 3,000, so a quarter of those complaints were filed by 3 people in the US. And those 3 individuals were filing these complaints based upon all the same thing: inaccessible school websites for individuals who had low vision or were visually impaired. And so the Department of Education decided in 2018 that they're going to change what's called their case processing manual. It's a document that's publicly available. You can Google OCR space CPM and pull it up. And the case processing manual tells you how Department of Ed intakes cases, reviews them, and decides what to keep and investigate and what to dismiss. So for those of us that work in this area, when they add more dismissal language, right, that gets us thinking. And so what they did is they added more dismissal language that allowed them, if there was a pattern of multiple complaints filed by the same group on the same topic, they could dismiss all of them. And so they did, in whole, dismiss thousands of them, including some in Oklahoma. And so that occurred in March of 2018. And then in November of 2018, they made even more changes to their manual, where they said, okay, we may reopen some of these because we recognize that people are concerned that these have been closed. We may reopen some, but when we reopen them, we're going to reopen them as what are called directed investigations, which means there's no complaining party. So when the Department of Ed would come to schools, so this was K-12 and higher ed, when they would come to schools, they had no complaining party, and they could either choose to investigate, but many of them chose to enter into resolution agreements, and they don't have to notify any complaining party. They could just do it between the Department of Ed and the institution because they'd taken the complaining party out of it because it was now a directed investigation. Fast forward to June 2019, OCR created what's still established and called the National Digital Access Team. And that is a group of investigators and attorneys who they took from all their regional offices. So like I worked in the Kansas City regional office, there's one in Dallas, there's one in Denver, there's one in Cleveland and Boston. They took people from all these different offices and they created a digital accessibility team, which still exists today. So anytime someone files a complaint about web accessibility, it's not given to your regular group within your regional office. It's given to this special digital accessibility team, and they process all web accessibility complaints. They also provide technical assistance as well. And so resource number one, in May 2022, Department of Ed and Department of Justice together created a 20 video series on digital accessibility. It's available on the Department of Ed website. Put it in the little Word document we're going to send around to you all. But in every resolution agreement I've read since then, everybody gets to go and certify that they've gone through the 20 video series. So Department of Ed really likes their video series. Following the creation of this team, the National Federation for the Blind, the NAACP, and a couple of others sued OCR because they decided this wave of dismissals back in 2018 violated their civil rights. And so it took about 2 years. And finally in 2020, the Department of Education settled that lawsuit with the National Federation for the Blind and the NAACP. I read the settlement agreement, and the settlement was this: we're going to pay a little bit of the plaintiff's legal fees, and of those 3,000 complaints that we dismissed, we're going to reopen 700. So they reopened 700 complaints. So as one can imagine, from 2018 to 2020, schools that heard nothing. And then in 2020, they got 700 reopened complaints. And they discontinued this dismissal practice. And so as it sits right now, there is not a mechanism for mass dismissals anymore for web accessibility. So if the complaints were filed around 2018 to 2020, they were handled differently. Now they are open and investigated through this digital accessibility. In addition, interestingly, to someone filing the lawsuit, so the NAACP and the National Federation for the Blind filing this lawsuit, a unknown individual filed a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights Inspector General's office regarding these mass dismissals. And in June of 2023, so it took about 5 years from the start of the Inspector General's complaint and 3 years from the settlement, the Office of Inspector General in June of 2023 issued their report. The report is available publicly online as well. And the Inspector General's report is incredibly critical of OCR's processes and their wave of dismissals. Interestingly, I would say from a legal perspective, if one were to get a web accessibility review, the Office of this OIG report outlines specifically the way that one would go about settling that without getting a finding of a violation of Section 504. So there is a way where you can, during the pendency of an investigation, so after you get notice of the investigation, before there's really even document requests, where you can ask the investigator, we would like to participate in what's called a 302 resolution. It's Section 302 of the Case Processing Manual, which allows for you to opt in to basically mediation with the Office for Civil Rights. And you don't have to trust me on this. You can read the independent Office of the Inspector General's report that goes through exactly how one would do this, because it happens so frequently. They outline the process. And so it provides a great description of that process. So if you all find yourselves with the Web Accessibility Review from Department of Ed, right? This doesn't apply to DOJ, but Department of Ed, you want to read that OIG report and show your leadership, hey, there is a way to initiate a resolution agreement. And this report kind of goes through all that. And so they initiated that report, which all brings us now to the middle of 2023. So we started in 2018, and now we're in the middle of 2023, and this is where it gets really interesting. On May 19th, 2023, the Department of Justice, not Department of Ed, that other federal agency that has regulatory authority over web accessibility, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and the Department of Ed Office for Civil Rights jointly issued a letter. And in that letter, they notified colleges and universities of hundreds of recent enforcement actions. In reality, those recent enforcement actions were the things that they had to revive after their settlement, that 700, and then also their new complaints. And what they particularly focused on, so if I was to like leave here as one of you all and you're interested in these areas, I'd read the OIG report, and then I would read the December 2022 consent decree from the University of California, Berkeley. And here's why. The letter references the consent decree, and the consent decree is how Department of Justice regulates Section 504, right? So Department of Ed regulates it by either making a finding that you violated the rules and then entering into an agreement with you, or letting you resolve it early in a mediation, like the Inspector General's report explains. Department of Justice is a little bit different. They sue you because the Department of Justice has legal authority to sue. Department of Education, they can't. OCR has no legal authority to sue you. It will never be a lawsuit. It will only be an investigation. Department of Justice, on the other hand, totally different beast. And so they can sue you, and that's what they did with the University of California, Berkeley. They sued them, and then they entered into a consent decree, which is basically like a mediated agreement prior to the conclusion of the lawsuit. And what that consent decree tells us are all the things UC Berkeley had to fix with their web accessibility to come into compliance with what the Department of Justice believes those rules are, not Department of Ed. So there is this kind of bifurcated approach that sometimes can be confusing. Okay, so the UC Berkeley consent decree directs them to make public online content on its website and all these other online platforms. It also required them to revise policies, give relevant training to folks, designate and hire a web accessibility coordinator and keep them, conduct accessibility testing of all of its online content, and then hire independent auditors annually to evaluate the accessibility of the content. And then the Department of Ed was quick to notice in that letter too. Yeah, we get it that Department of Justice sued UC Berkeley, but you probably should be scared of us more because while they made one consent decree with one institution, we had 50 compliance reviews that ended with resolution agreements of 50 institutions between May 2022 and May 2023. So this is an area that both Department of Justice and Department of Ed, although they address them differently, are very, very serious about. And those are good resources to look at the UC Berkeley consent decree. And now I will hand this over to Brandee, talk a little bit more about Department of Justice.
So for those of you who don't live in the regulatory world, which you can hear as for those of you who have a life and aren't nerds like me and Mackenzie, this is kind of what we do. We get that that's not really your wheelhouse. The Department of Justice, after all of these consent decrees and other issues came out, they started looking at this is an area of regulatory focus. And so what they decided to do is issue what's called a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, an NPRM for short. And that is in essence a power that is delegated by Congress to specific agencies, and it allows the agency to go out. If you've heard the term sub-regulatory guidance, those are things like the Dear Colleague letters you get from OCR, things like that, that don't carry the weight of law behind them. Contrast that to rules that go through the rulemaking process absolutely carry the weight of law. So Department of Justice issued a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking on August 4th of 2023. They have to publish that rule in the Federal Register. That allows the public to respond and comment to those things. And what you often see is, yes, individuals will respond, but you'll also see big advocacy groups like Educase and others will respond to very specific points and try to make a more collective and thoughtful argument, if you will. In essence, it's people going back to the Department of Justice saying, this rule is good because X, and this rule is not good because X. It might be practical issues, it might be any number of things. So the comment period ended on October of 2023. And now we're going to wait to see if and when the final rule comes out. Interestingly, Department of Justice issued a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking in this very same area all the way back in 2010, but it didn't go anywhere. And at the end, we'll kind of hit on what might happen to the current notice, just given the general federal landscape. But at that time, despite the proposal receiving many, many comments, no action was taken. And we'll have a fact sheet available in the resource sheet that Mackenzie mentioned as well. So why does all of this matter to you?
it's exactly what Mackenzie already said, that the DOJ is going to enforce the Title II of the ADA under the standards that come out of this notice of proposed rulemaking in the event they become final. It's going to, if adopted in its current form, it will address all content on all websites and mobile apps used by any public entity for the delivery of any of its programs or services for the general public, and those would be required to be accessible unless your data fits one of 7 very narrow exceptions that we'll go over. The technical standard referenced in the DOJ proposed rules is WCAG 2.1, which is what the courts have been relying upon to enforce Title II of the ADA. But interestingly, after the notice of proposed rulemaking, WCAG 2.2 was released. So some of the comments that came back were, which standard is it going to be? And many commentators feel like it makes way more sense to move to the current version of WCAG. What I will be interested to see is do the rules reference any future changes to what may come out of WCAG as well? So what happens if this rule becomes final? What does your institutional timeline look like? Despite the fact that DOJ basically has said these have been the requirements and that's what courts are enforcing. But from the regulatory side, they're going to give 2 years for large entities to comply and 3 years for small entities. But while many of you may be going, yeah, I'm a small entity, it depends upon how it's looked at. So it's looking at your population. If you're 50,000 or more over, then that puts you into the large entity, but they're looking at it from the perspective of, like, if you're a community college and you're a county entity, they're going to look at your entire county. For those of us who are state agencies, they're going to look at the population of your entire state, which means the vast majority of institutions in Oklahoma are going to be held to the 2-year compliance timeline. So if the final rule is published by July 1st of this year, you will be likely required to comply by July 1st of 2026. So moving into what are the exceptions to the rules. So as a general overarching concept, everything has to be made accessible minus these 7 very limited categories. The first is archived web content that is maintained and denoted as such. So for example, for OSU's Board of Regents, we have a lot of board minutes available. Those might be something we would look at considering marking as archived materials. You might start evaluating your website for what would be considered archived, because it's not routinely accessed, right? It's not something people are looking at unless they're looking for a very specific historical question. The second would be PDFs, spreadsheets, and databases that are not currently relied upon for services or programs. However, you would still be required to provide those in an accessible format upon request. So even if you don't have to make them public facing in that form, you still have to provide them. And then the third category is web content posted by third parties on your website. But the caveat here is we're only talking about third-party material over which the institution has no control. If you, the institution, go out and contract with a vendor to provide some service on your behalf, that material has to be accessible. On the flip side, if you have third parties posting on your website, like if you have a message board or something along those lines, that material does not necessarily have to be accessible, though the platform itself does. So whatever environment that those posts are being made has to be accessible. And I'll kick it back to Mackenzie to go over the remaining 4 exceptions.
Okay, so we're going to take these as a group because they're kind of all related. So here we go. Course content. So course content on a public entity's password protected or otherwise secured website. So think learning management system. For admitted students enrolled in a specific course offered by a public post-secondary institution. So if we have our course content that is on our password protected Canvas or Blackboard sites, and we are, woohoo, it helps to be public, right? And we're a public post-secondary institution, that is going to be an exception for everything being accessible. However, we still have our requirements for accessibility for our students who need it. So it doesn't abrogate that, but it does perhaps give us a little bit of time. And so then we go into the final exception, which is class or course content on a public entity's password protected or otherwise secured website for students enrolled or parents of students enrolled in a specific class or course at a public elementary or secondary school. And these parallel the provisions the Department of Justice proposes that in classes where students are enrolled and where course content and material is limited in those courses, none of the content needs to be accessible until and this is the big one, until there is a student with a disability that needs content in an accessible format, which is what we have right now, right? But once the school, and then it gives timeframes, but once the school learns a student in the class needs any web content to be accessible, all web content in that class must be made accessible. And this part kind of goes beyond the existing requirements under the ADA and 504 for providing accessibility formats when based upon one student's request. And the Department of Justice intends that this approach will gradually lead to the creation of more accessible content that will be available in other courses. So if the school learns of a student's request after the course begins, so after. So we know we really like when the students come to our accessibility resources before and make us aware before they're continuing students, so we can look at their class schedules and know the Department of Justice proposes that all course content offered over the web be made accessible within 5 days of the request after a course has started. And so that provides a time frame where we had really been working on what most courts reviewed as a reasonable time frame without specific designation, no numerical designation. So this would say 5 days. So the proposed exception would not apply to, people aren't really doing that many MOOCs these days, these massive online courses, but it would not, this exception would not apply to courses open to the general public or to all students. So web content and MOOCs are things that are open to the general public or to all students would need to be accessible, all the content from the start, because you wouldn't have this course content exception.
So if these rules become final, the big question, burning question that everyone has is, what does it mean to be compliant? Because the rules, interestingly, are relatively silent on that. DOJ did ask for input for those commenting on what that would look like. The good news is, good news in some ways, is that they explicitly recognize that it is not possible to design and maintain a website that conforms in all aspects in every single page all the time. They recognize that perfection is not attainable in this area, but they didn't go as far as saying, like, what does compliance mean? Is it 90% of your pages or so on? So in the absence of explicit direction, what we can look to is some prior language from the DOJ, and I'm going to read a relatively long quote, but the gist of this very long quote is: 1, have policies; 2, test your policies; 3, fix any issues that you have; and 4, repeat, basically. So you're going to go in a cycle. You've got to constantly be monitoring in this area. That's the key takeaway, is your policies need to address how you're going to do that and how often you're going to do that. So the quote is: a public entity proactively tested its existing web and mobile app content for conformance with WCAG 2.1 level AA using automated testing on a regular basis, for example, every 30 days, conducted user testing on a regular basis, for example, every 90 days, and tested any new web and mobile app content for conformance with WCAG 2.1 level AA before that content was posted on its website or added to its mobile app. This public entity also remediated any nonconformance found in its existing web and mobile app content after the test, for example, within 2 weeks. An entity that took these or similar steps on its own initiative could be deemed to have complied with its obligations under the ADA, even if a person with a disability encountered an access barrier or a particular automated testing report indicated noncompliance. The public entity would be able to rely on its existing effectively working web and mobile app content accessibility testing and remediation program to demonstrate compliance with the ADA. So the takeaway for your institutions is to look at how is your content created. If it's very decentralized and departments have the power and authority to post on the website without going through a central office, you're going to want to consider, what does that look like? And how do you get those individuals who are posting content trained and understanding what these requirements are? I can speak from experience when I say I recognize how difficult that can be. We sometimes get a complaint about, we might have a dead link on a website somewhere, and sometimes it's a much harder process than I would have anticipated to figure out, where does that link live and who can take it down, who has access. So look at potentially centralizing a little bit more ahead of these rules coming out, or having an office that or a person that reviews all material before it gets posted to make sure that you're able to comply with these rules.
And Brandee, I think that, I don't know if we can emphasize that point enough, that if we see the finalization of these rules, the web accessibility isn't just going to be for the main website. It's going to be for every college website, every departmental website, right? That perhaps someone has access to now, probably dating Joomla or whatever, right? That they're putting up their own stuff. Isn't that cool? And let's say part of that is not accessible. The defensive strategy that we would take based upon what Department of Justice said in their own regulations is they want to see, right? Are you testing it on a regular basis? Are you testing it before it goes out? If you're testing it and you see problems, can you remediate it quickly? And basically, can you show us the report and plan of how you're doing this policy text fix repeat cycle over and over? And so if that decision-making authority is housed at a department level, then departments are going to have to be able to show this too. The centralized, what we're doing for the main page is not going to substantiate what they want to see everywhere. And so that takes us to, what should we do? So first off, I think we have to pay attention to the notice of proposed rulemaking. And if it becomes final, then we will have 2 years to get for real. Now, do what you want in the interim and make those good plans and start that implementation. But we are in a really interesting time that Brandee will talk about at the end about regulatory environments and whether or not during this interesting political time we're going to see these things become final. So we've got to pay attention and know when those rules become final. But we have to also remember those rules are what Department of Justice is going to hold you to. Department of Education does not have to wait for a final rule from the Department of Justice to evaluate web accessibility and to require compliance with their thought process about web accessibility. They can do that right now. And in fact, they are doing that in our state. And so we are not immune from that. And so regardless if we see these final rules, Department of Education is still out there reviewing web accessibility. And so we make the following recommendations, realizing, you may have to ratchet it up if these rules become final, but at the very least, you got to make sure that we are using what Department of Justice is suggesting as the pinnacle of compliance, right? So that we can reach towards that, because Department of Ed will look at that as well. And so first, we probably need to create web accessibility teams. And I'm sure y'all have already done this. You're well on your way, identifying stakeholders within our organization to tackle these issues. Like this isn't just an IT problem, right? We need our folks from accessibility resources, or if you call it disability services, right? Whatever word you use, and our procurement offices, and we'll get there in a little bit about, buying new technology and making sure that screen readers can use it, and how we make sure our purchasing offices are aware of that as well, and then also faculty. So making sure we have a good web accessibility team of people we hope will stick around so that we can work through these issues together. And then we need to review our current websites and also our online products. And have these available, although I suspect Allie's much smarter at this than two well-intended lawyers. But there are a number of accessibility checkers that are available. The first that we're going to make a recommendation is from California Polytechnic Institute. It's cpp.edu, and they have a wonderful accessibility checker. And the second is from Utah State. It's the WAVE Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool at webaim.org. They're both pretty good. If you are, strapped for cash and aren't interested in hiring a third party to come out, those are places to start. And then ensuring that new content posted by the institution is accessible. Although and Brandee's going to talk to us a little bit about AbleTech and the fantastic work of AbleTech in the state. And then we are so fortunate to have people like Allie. And in addition, if you're looking for resources outside of the state, the University of Washington has what I believe is a really great resource opportunity. They have really high accessibility standards in the state through state law, and the University of Washington has some wonderful resources on their website that I found to be particularly enlightening. So helping really with that new content creation, and then future procurement and design. And I'm going to leave that in Able Tech for Brandee.
Yeah, so we are very fortunate in Oklahoma to have Oklahoma Able Tech. I'm very fortunate because they sit on the Stillwater campus of OSU, so I get to work with them pretty routinely, which is great. Lissa Prince is actually on here today, so I'm going to give her just a quick shout out because she is a fantastic resource. But a number, we'll include links on our sheet, but some of the things that Able Tech can offer, and many of you are likely familiar with some of it already, but they have a lot of free resources, starting with some video self-paced courses. You can take those, and some actually walk you through how to create an accessible document or how to create an accessible PDF, things like that. Those are generally free and range from 15 minutes to 3 to 4 hours, depending on how quickly you want to move through those. They also have some more directed reviews that they can do for you. Because of their limited staffing, they can't necessarily do a comprehensive review for your institution, but they could do a high impact review or assessment that basically gets to the heart of kind of where are you, where do you need to go, and what are your next best steps. Those services do come at a charge, but because they are also a state agency, they offer them at a discount to other state agencies. So it's dependent upon your needs, but they can be customized. They can also do customized training for your campus. So if you have specific needs that you feel like your campus needs met that their existing training doesn't do, they can help you with that also at a fairly nominal charge. And then a plug for their upcoming Tech Access Conference. It is February 27th through the 29th. It is free, and we will include a link to register. The idea this year is to build awareness around ADA accessibility, particularly in light of the upcoming potential rules, while at the same time avoiding intimidating people who might be new to the topic. So it's going to be a broad category of people who attend and who present. So I hope you'll check that out and utilize Able Tech for the fantastic resources that they can provide to you. I'm often amazed at how many of even our faculty on the Stillwater campus have no idea that this resource exists and that they can use it. So really working to kind of get the word out about what they can do. So overarching, you've heard us mention policies a few times. We're lawyers. We like to talk about those things. So I will always say, don't have a policy if you're not going to follow it. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, write a policy that you can follow. Rule number 3, don't be ashamed of swiping someone else's policies as a starting point. So sometimes it's hard to, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? We have these institutions that have consent decrees or have gone through other processes and have really good policies in place. So some examples of those, UC Berkeley that Mackenzie already mentioned. Penn State also has a good policy on their website, and we will again include links to those. But as just a high level starting point, you're going to need a policy that encompasses those general things that we talked about, which are test, fix, repeat. That kind of cycle needs to be documented in a policy somewhere.
So I think the interesting thing about, looking at other institutions' policies in this area is we don't have to, the state of Oklahoma does not have a law that is going to be more broad than what the federal law requires here. And so we have this unique opportunity to be able to look at other states and see what they're doing and not be so worried about what our state law says, that, borrowing, assuming we can do what the policy says, isn't a bad option in this area, because the federal law is what we're looking at, and every state has to follow that. And I'll also give a shout out to Able Tech. So TCC had a fantastic web accessibility review conducted by Able Tech in the last few months, and it was so helpful and thorough. We shared it with a number of vendors where they found that the vendors' resources were lacking, and the vendors took the report and they said it's one of the best reports they've ever seen. And it was a nationwide vendor. And so just props to Able Tech on doing a fantastic job, and not only helping us as agencies, but also being kind of thought leaders in the industry. So y'all are doing a great job. So thank you very much for your help. So if you're still not convinced that this is an issue, although we don't have time to cover every bit of litigation about ADA issues, I want to put this in the context of because right now we're talking about federal regulatory agencies. I really don't want Department of Ed, Department of Justice on my door knocking, right? But I probably want a lawsuit even less. And I think to help us contextualize that, just so we know, in 2023, 77% of lawsuits that are being filed against organizations regarding ADA type issues are in this area of web accessibility. And of those, one might think, well, and most of it is in e-commerce platforms and the accessibility of being able to purchase things online. However, education, particularly in our mobile apps, we're kind of moving up into the top, and we're the third sector down in that kind of that big litigation. And we supersede areas like travel, hospitality, healthcare, and entertainment sectors. So unfortunately, we're up there. And these web accessibility suits are really rising exponentially, according to the latest data from Forbes. They put out a report in June of 2023. And in 2023, there were over 4,000 individual lawsuits on web accessibility. And that was up from 2,300 in 2018. That's across the nation. The vast majorities of these are in 3 states: New York, California, and Florida. We aren't may feel like we are, but we aren't, in fact, a high litigation state. We're a pretty low litigation state. And so when we see these web accessibility lawsuits, we're primarily looking in New York, California, and Florida, with really New York and California taking the cake. But we're not immune. And so recently, the Department of Justice negotiated a settlement agreement with the state of Oklahoma on some website stuff just a few weeks ago. So we're not immune from either federal investigation or from. So if you want kind of accurate and timely information on what these lawsuits look like, UsableNet has a really good year-end 2023 report where they go over all the different types of lawsuits. And given the thousands of legal cases, there's no real single fully comprehensive list for us to look at from a higher ed perspective. However, there is a very creative IT faculty over at the University of Minnesota who's doing a pretty good job keeping up with all the lawsuits regarding web accessibility in higher ed. And so her website will include on the list, Dr. Carlson is her name, and from the University of Minnesota. And you can scroll through by state and also look by topic and see what all lawsuits in higher ed. The University of Washington also has a collection of both resolution agreements and litigation on this issue as well. So there are ways, if you want to kind of weigh the risk, looking at other states and make those determinations for your institution. Those are the resources we'll provide. Okay, Brandee, let's talk about the probability. So I love reading the tea leaves, right? Like a fool.
Yeah. Mackenzie's way better at reading the tea leaves than I am. But what I will tell you is, so where do we go from here? And the answer is, who knows? So the rules are out there. The comments have been received. If you have ever watched a snail go across the sidewalk, the federal government moves slower than that, right? So nothing moves quickly at the federal level. As a comparator, the Title IX rules, new rules were published in July of 2022, and we still don't have final rules. So we don't know what the timing on these looks like, and there's a myriad of things that could completely moot this process. As I mentioned earlier, the 2010 rules in this area were killed as part of kind of just the general federal landscape. And as everyone is probably painfully aware, we are in an election year. So things, just a couple of examples that could derail these rules are a change in federal administration. If the final rules aren't published before the election and there's a turnover in the White House, that could cause it. Other things that could happen, new policy arguments. Or there's something in the comments that DOJ didn't really consider that has a really significant impact and they want to go a different direction. So those are all like just a couple of the, I don't know, a million ways to die in the West that these types of rules can eventually either get derailed, completely revised, or significantly delayed. So there's no great way to tell exactly when they're going to come out. So it's a kind of stay tuned. But importantly for your institutions, DOJ already believes this is the law, and that's how they're enforcing in terms of litigation, in terms of OCR enforcement. I would adopt these rules as what you're expected to do, whether they get published or not. This is how it's eventually going to go, whether it goes through this process or you end up in some kind of administrative or litigation. Those are the standards that you're going to be expected to be held to. So in some ways, it doesn't really matter if they get published or not, but in other ways, it has a fairly significant impact on your campus. So with that, I will wrap it up and we will open it up for questions or comments. And anything Mackenzie wants to add on reading the tea leaves, because like I said, she's better at reading those than I am.
Not a thing, my friend. Do we have any questions?
We've had several questions about if we would have the video, because there was a lot that people wanted to refer back to. So yes, everyone will get the recording. But if you've been taking notes, this is a good time to go back and ask for any clarification or suggestions or anything.
Yeah, I have a question. Can we just unmute and ask a question? Is that
Yes,
okay?
go ahead.
So when you were talking about how if there's a page that an older document and somebody could request to have it in an accessible form, how does that request? There's supposed to be something on that page that says, do you want this in accessible form, or what would be the best way to, how would that request process look like?
That's a great question. The rules don't address that specificity, but it's something you might want to consider. Do you have something on the bottom of all of your pages that to request this in an accessible form, contact X? There's no great answer to that, and it might be hard to get a disclaimer like that on every single page, given the multitude of pages out there. But having some kind of a landing page where if someone were to Google or search through your institutional website to try to figure out where to go, something that directs them on where to find that would be helpful.
Looks like it's pretty quiet, Brandee. I think we may be done.
Everyone's soaking it in. Thank you guys. This was excellent.
Leave it to the lawyers to bore people to tears. That's what we do best.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, you're getting lots of comments in the chat. If in case you're not watching, you might want to take a look over there. I will get the recording out soon with all of the resources that were shared, including links that were posted in the chat. And it will probably be shared on Monday, so you can look for that on Monday.
Well, as always, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting us. We love coming to talk.
Thank you. You guys did an excellent job. And thank you everyone who attended very much. Bye.